Members of President Biden's COVID-19 response team appearing before a Senate Health and Labor Committee this afternoon. Members were grilled about being unprepared for Omicron's tidal wave. Dr. Anthony Fauci outlined data, though, showing vaccines still offer the best protection against the new variant.
If you look at vaccinated versus unvaccinated, there's about a 10 times greater chance that you'd be infected if you were unvaccinated, about a 17 times greater chance that you'd be hospitalized if you were unvaccinated, and about a 20 times likelihood that you would be dead if you were unvaccinated. So when you look at every parameter, 10 times, 17 times, 20 times, infection, hospitalization, death.
And while the evidence shows vaccines do protect against severe illness and death, there's no denying the testing situation in the U.S. could definitely improve. One CEO at the forefront of the pandemic says the current testing situation is, quote, an unacceptable mess. Here in a Fox Business exclusive is Todos Medical CEO Gerald Commissiong. He is joining us now with more on what his company is doing to ramp up testing and making breakthrough developments in testing and mobile testing. All right, Gerald, let's just get it right out there. You've been very critical of the U.S. government here. Specifically, why?
Well, because all of this was very predictable. You know, in 2020 over the holidays, we all knew that testing was very difficult to come by, and what we found was that our testing samples were competing with our holiday packages in order to get results done in the lab. And guess what? We weren't able to get the tests to the lab, and the labs weren't able to run them in time, and the virus spread. In 2021, exactly the same thing happened. The solution, of course, is not to change the system from that perspective. The solution is to bring the lab closer to the people. So you have the tests go to labs that are close to where the people are getting sampled, or you bring mobile labs directly to the people and then run the tests on site. The lack of government support for testing is really what's driven the inability of companies to develop and implement those structures. Now that they're behind the eight ball, I think that could change, and it needs to change very fast, because just like we saw Omicron creep up in a month, it can change rapidly again with another one.
Well, there's no doubt that the U.S. government was caught flat-footed on this. In fact, my sister-in-law, Dr. Anne Ramoyne, had said we need an Operation Warp Speed for testing kits. What are you guys doing at Todos, which is a publicly traded company? It's a microcap. You guys are headquartered in Israel. Tell me how you're ramping up testing and how you've been able to churn these things out.
Yeah, what we do at our lab, Provista Diagnostics down in Atlanta, and we also have clients all over the country, is we stocked up on supplies. You know, everybody knows that eventually you're going to use those supplies, so it's not as if, you know, you're going to run out and not be able to use them. So we stocked up millions and millions of testing kits, of the plastics needed to run the tests, and of the extraction and all the equipment, so we could scale rapidly and respond quickly to the solution. So we ramped up from under a few hundred tests earlier this summer because the demand wasn't there. We're now processing easily in the 5,000 to 6,000 range, and we have plans to be able to scale up to the hundreds of thousands, because most of the labs right now, they've moved away from COVID testing and they don't have the infrastructure to meet this demand, which is another foreseeable issue. And we set up to be able to support all those labs and also direct people to be able to do that testing. So we're ramping our volume substantially. And we're also bringing new technologies to market in the testing that we think can make it better, faster, and more reliable than PCR testing or rapid antigen testing.
Well, you guys have several COVID-19 diagnostic tests, and I understand one of them is an antibody test that is able to tell people how many antibodies they have of COVID. Why is that helpful to know? Can you explain that to our viewers? And when could something like this be ready immediately for the populations of the world?
Well, it's ready now. It's called the cPass test. And the key is not that it's testing any antibodies, it's that it's testing those neutralizing antibodies. Those are the ones that the vaccine produces. The problem with the vaccines that we have, of course, is twofold. One, you get the vaccine, you get a high number of antibodies, but then over time, those key antibodies that that vaccine produces, they go down as the immunity wanes. The second problem with Omicron is that these vaccines have been targeting the earliest strain, the ancestral strain from Wuhan. We all know that that strain's gone. So the the effectiveness of each antibody to prevent infection has gone down substantially, and that's really the big problem. So you want to have as many of those titers as possible. That's why they're telling people to get boosted. But if you have a lot of antibodies already and don't know it, and you take vaccination, there could be something called autoantibodies. You create antibodies to the antibodies. So it's important to know the antibodies that you have, because it will allow you to make decisions. And I think it will convince a lot of people who think they are protected with the vaccine, or because they had a previous infection, they'll actually realize they don't have that. And it'll encourage them to get vaccinated. So I think the idea that people having this information is scary for the government, it's the exact opposite. I think with this information, people will make the right decisions for themselves.
Right. Well, we need the government to start ramping up here, because this is still very much a problem here in the United States. Gerald Commissiong, great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.